Depends on where your profession takes you.
Yeah.
Good evening.
I agree with you.
Good evening. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Wareham School Committee, and it is a joint meeting of the Wareham School Committee and the Wareham Finance Committee and the Wareham Selectmen. I call this meeting to order, and before I do, I'd like to say WCTV is recording the meeting for broadcast and recording, and Mrs. Rez is making an audio recording. This is a public hearing on the fiscal year 19 budget, and I would like to welcome members of the Finance Committee, the Selectmen, Town Administrator, Mr. Sullivan. And because some of us who are here meeting for our different committees have quorums, we will have to open the committee formally. So that's what we're going to do first. The procedures for our meeting are introduction of each committee, presentation by Dr. Shaver Hood and our financial director, Mr. Michael McMillan, and afterwards we'll open it up to questions. So first, I would like to say thank you for the members of the Finance Committee, the Selectmen, and Mr. Sullivan for being here. And in order for all of us to introduce ourselves, I'll start with the Director of the Finance Committee, Mr. Pigeon, and would you introduce or have everyone in your committee introduce themselves and open your committee too?
Thank you, Committee Chairman. I'm Bernie Pigeon, Chairman of the Finance Committee. Call the meeting to order. I have a quorum. Jerry Stefanski. Stuart Novik. Dave Bird.
Thank you. Next, Chairman Teitelbaum, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, Peter Teitelbaum, Chairman of the Wareham Board of Selectmen. We do not have sufficient members for a quorum, so there's no meeting to open. However, I can assure you that between Selectman Tropiano and myself, there's about 500 pounds of selectmen up here, and I think we'll make up in bulk for what we lack in numbers.
And Mr. Sullivan.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight.
And as members of the school committee, we will introduce ourselves also, starting with
My name is Michael McMillan. I'm the school business manager.
Kim Shaver-Hood, Superintendent.
Joyce Bakayaki. Laurie Spear. Mary Morgan. Reporting Secretary, Cheryl Rez.
Jamie Reed, Student Representative.
Jeff Sweat, good evening.
Is that everyone? Okay. And Dr. Shaver-Hood has an announcement to make before the presentation.
I would just like to ask if anyone would like to help us stuff a bus for Christmas. We will be stuffing a bus on Friday, December 15th from 4 to 8. The bus will be parked at the high school track parking lot. This is for Turning Points. Please bring your new unwrapped gift, toys, gift cards, or food item for the donation. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we'll have the presentation. I'd also like to say thank you for all the principals being here and the directors.
Good evening. Is this on? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening. Tonight, we will be presenting our budget information regarding our FY19 budget. This budget has proven to be very difficult as the divide between the needs of our students and the available resources continue to widen. Many hours of preparation have gone into the development of the FY19 budget, and while our work is not complete, it is the goal to meet the needs of all our students. We are seeking to provide our students with a high caliber and rigorous academic educational opportunities which meet their needs. I would like to thank Mr. McMillan, our administrators, the members of the Superintendent Budget Advisory, Mrs. Bakayaki and Mr. Sweat, for their insight, expertise, and their willingness to carefully examine all account lines. As well, I appreciate the willingness of the Selectmen and Finance Committee to work with the schools. I would be amiss if I did not acknowledge our town manager, Mr. Sullivan, for his support and continued collaboration with the schools, as it's our goal to provide quality service for all the citizens in the town of Wareham. Thank you. Okay. Tonight, as we begin the budget, our budget was built around our strategic plan. We will support challenging, engaging, innovative, and globally minded educational experiences for all. Please keep in mind that this is our hallmark, what we work for, and this budget has been developed around these words.
Good evening, and thank you. So we'll start by cutting to the chase. So this is our budget request, and then I'm going to go into a bit more detail on how the budget was developed and some of the factors that are part of the decision and the context for this budget. So the total budget that we have developed for 2018-19 school year is $29,413,679, and that would be an increase of just around 3.6%. And here it's been split between net school spending and non-net school spending. And non-net school spending is almost, but not quite, almost entirely pupil transportation. So just before I show you this slide, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through the process of how we developed the budget. And essentially what we did was we developed a level service budget, if you like, and I'm going to show you what that came to. And then we made reductions. I'm going to show you how that was done. And then some other factors which didn't even make it into the first cut. So those are the three slides I'm going to present now. So the first was the budget development increases. So we started with our 17-18 budget, the one we have now to implement. Straight off the bat, we have a little under $1.4 million in salary increases. And that comes off the back of our union contracts, which we have in place. We did recently put in place a better teacher, that's Unit A contract, reflecting the need for us to be competitive with the districts around us in terms of teacher salaries. And actually the contract we have in place now is a small step, but only a small step in the right direction, and we still struggle to recruit teachers. But so just when you take just the contractual increases for our salaries, we have that increase. In addition to that, out of district tuition, that's where we educate students. Wareham students are sent to placements outside of the district to receive special education services. So we are not able to educate them in district because of their needs, and they go to other more appropriate placements outside of the district. So that is a big part of our budget, and around 2015 and 2016 it started to level off a little bit, but unfortunately that started to climb again, and we are now looking at increases of almost $400,000 in that line going into next year. Now, coupled with that, and this is part of this out-of-district tuition, is we have a fund called Circuit Breaker, which is funds which we receive in reimbursement from the state for certain special education expenditure. And we use those funds to offset the total cost of out-of-district tuition. With this year, we had around $900,000 to offset that tuition, and next year we had a little over 900 actually. Next year, we estimate we'll have around 700,000, and that difference means that that's more that the LEA, that this budget has to pick up, and that also increases these costs. We're also seeing, transportation cost increases. There's a few things going on in here, but one of the big parts is an increase in the cost of transporting students out of district. So the increase you have in out of district tuition About 3/4 of that is made up of new placements. Those new placements will require transportation, additional transportation, and that too will drive up our costs. We also have a project in order to be compliant with federal communication regulations, we had to upgrade radios in our buses, and that's also part of that increase. So, like our teacher salaries, our substitute salaries, the amount of money we pay for a substitute to come in and cover a class is not competitive with the districts around us. We pay around $65 a day for a teacher, qualified teacher, to come in front of our students. So that, if they work for 7 hours a day, that's less than $10 an hour, and that just is not enough money for us to be able to attract these substitutes to come work here, and we have a great deal of difficulty in filling those positions each day. So in order to increase that rate, we've included a line here for just under 100,000. And then, in the interest of simplicity, everything else, which is a little less than, I think, 0.5% of the budget, and that's just a whole host of increases and decreases in things, in supplies and services, is about 7,000 to 8,000. So after all those increases are applied, that's just under $31 million. However, in recognition of the situation the town of Wareham is in, we looked at our budget to identify means to make reductions. And these are the reductions we plan to make. We plan to reduce our net school spending by $1.3 million. And we will also reduce our non-net school spending by $200,000. So off of that level service budget that I showed you in the previous slide, those costs we're seeking to reduce by $1.5 million. So that is no small undertaking for us to make that amount of reduction to our budget, and we are working hard to make sure that is implemented in the best possible way. And we are looking at every line, every service, every contracted service, every supply to identify savings. However, the reality is, a budget such as ours, a large chunk of that will come from reduction in positions. Of course, we'll try and do that as much as possible through a natural turnover, so as people retire and are not replaced, we're able to cut the position. As people leave and are not replaced, we're able to cut the position. But with such high numbers, that's going to be a difficult task to fulfill. And then $200,000 will also save in transportation, and we are working hard there, looking at a host of options around improving routing, improving the efficiency of the service we provide, making sure that we deliver transportation, particularly if it's out of district, in the cheapest way possible, and that through that process we will reduce $200,000 in our transportation. So I just wanted to back up a little bit, because that level service budget included none of the additional projects that the principals and directors and administrators presented when we met at the all-day budget workshop. So those requests, we had none of those made it into the final budget. So there was some capital, which has obviously come out. There's custodial supplies, we were able to make some savings. Instructional supplies and technology improvements we wanted to make, they were not included. Staffing requests of over $200,000, and so on. And none of that was included. So really what we're talking about is a very bare bones budget. And I realize $1 million doesn't feel like that, but really, given the increases which are through the contracts and tuition and so on, we're really doing the minimum. Now, we have, over the last few years in particular, worked closely with the town administrator and the town capital planning committee, and we'll continue to do that to ensure that our one-off purchases and capital needs are met through that process, and that's an important part of ensuring that our districts are viable and able to run. And including with that, for example, is we're looking at options around different vehicles for out-of-district transportation, which will help to reduce our overall costs. So this slide summarizes our budget by major account. And so I realize this is a slightly busy slide, but I just wanted to highlight something, because as we develop our budget further and get into discussions about where things have changed and so on. An important factor is a change we've made around this IDEA grant. So I'm just going to explain what's happened, right? So the IDEA grant is a grant we get from the state through the federal government for special education services. And in the past, we've used that for salaries and to offset salaries and contracted services, the special education services we provide in the district. However, this year and into next year, we are changing how we spend that, and we're going to use all the money, which will be up to $550,000 next year. We're going to use all that money against out-of-district tuition. And the reason we're doing that is that because of some fees that are built into the way the IDEA grant is run, that will save us some money. And it's all, but of course that means that account lines that were before were offset by that line, that amount are no longer offset. And so where it might look like an increase, it's actually just because we've moved the grant. So I just wanted to highlight that. So really, the far right column is a real decrease, a real increase or decrease after you take into account the change with the IDA grant. There's not a lot of increases after the reductions we plan to make. Really, the biggest one is the payments out of school districts, so out of district schools, it close to $700,000. And just to hark back to what I said at the start, that's a combination of both an increase in the cost, so an increase in the overall cost, and an increase in the proportion of the cost that has to be picked up by this LEA budget. So I also just wanted to provide, so that's the financial data, and I just wanted to acknowledge and present some of the context for the decisions we've made. So we know we have a falling enrollment, and that is one of the things that will be taken into consideration as we make our reductions. And although our enrollment is falling, what's not falling is not really falling is the number of special education students we have in the district, and also, although it's not represented here, the level of need of those students. And they are a significant factor in driving the resources that we have in play in the district and what is required. And then our staffing levels. So we had a small increase actually from last year to this year. Overall, we have reduced some 50 teachers since 2011. So we are making reductions in our staffing. We have been, and putting into place that $1.3 million in reductions that we discussed, that will bring further reductions in our staffing numbers. I should say this is the report we sent to the state, and includes all our staff except some custodians and custodians and bus drivers are not included here, but most other staff are. So where next for us? Well, we are working on those transportation savings, looking at all the options. We're also looking to see where we can, essentially regionalize services. So where can we work with other districts to reduce the overall cost for us? So for example, if we are sending a bus, to Plymouth, can we pick up other students? Can we take other students from other districts with us and help to reduce the overall costs? Are there programs or services that we can provide where we may not have enough students to provide the service ourselves, but if we work with other districts surrounding us, it may make it more worthwhile and help to reduce costs? And we're also working with the town, the municipal department, to identify areas where we can work together, which may help to reduce costs, at the very least will help to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our services. We've had some really early initial discussions with the town administrator around operations and maintenance, which seems like a good area where we should be able to work together. And also, I mentioned earlier, the capital and free cash needs to support our district. And then just where we are in the budget process for people who are not familiar with it, obviously this is a public hearing, and the next process, at the next school committee meeting, we will present the budget to the school committee to vote, and thereafter the superintendent will write to the town administrator to advise him of that, the outcome of that vote, and then we will begin discussions in preparation for town meeting. So invariably this is kind of the start of a process, and there will be lots of opportunity for discussion. If you have any questions, if you would like to make any points, please get in touch. There will be more and more detailed information available on our website as we go through this process. And I would just thank you for your attention.
At this time, are there any questions? And if there are questions, if someone does have a question, we ask you to come down to the microphone, identify yourself, and ask your question. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question? Mr. Flaherty?
Hi. Anyway, okay, I noticed there was a bullet item that mentioned security cameras. Where was that going to be used for $100,000? Thanks.
Yes, you're asking where we're locating the security
Yeah,
cameras?
where's the need for that?
High school, middle school, and our elementaries.
Are there any for the buses?
Yes, there are also security cameras being installed on the buses.
Right now, do all buses have security cameras that work?
No,
How many do not?
The majority do not have cameras.
The majority do not have security cameras.
that's correct.
Will they all have security cameras if we get the $100,000?
Yes,
Actually, security cameras are included in our operating budget. To upgrade our security cameras as part of the increase in transportation.
So next year, one way or the other, all buses will have security cameras.
Yeah.
Not necessarily all buses.
all buses that transport regular education students will have security cameras. Buses that go out of district may not.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mhm.
Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question?
I guess I'll go over to the microphone. Once again, thank you to the superintendent and especially Mr. McMillan, who's proven very adept not only with coming up with numbers that people can understand, but he can explain them in a way that even I can understand them, and I'm not a numbers person. Going forward, once again, on the town side, we asked of all of our departments to come up with a level-funded budget. And I can tell you that internally, many of them squawked and said, well, but what about the service we provide? And, the answer has been, since we expect a minimal increase in revenue, well below 1% of the overall town budget, the answer from the town administrator has consistently been, no, you've got to come up with a level-funded budget. I do appreciate the sort of pre-whittling that has gone on by the school committee, by the superintendent, by Mr. McMillan. They've already done 60% of the work to get the number down to where it needs to be to fit in with the overall budget. But I can tell everybody here that if the schools were to receive $1 million more, we would have to get rid of about 15 town employees out of, I believe, somewhere around approximately 109 employees who do not work for either the water pollution control facility or the EMS, because those people are paid a little bit differently. They come out of, EMS comes out of the earnings from what they charge to transport people, and the water pollution control facility, those salaries are paid out of an enterprise fund. So once again, we see what we need, we see what we don't have, and we'll have to engage in the process of whittling. It's regrettable. We'd all like to have more money to spend. I mean, I can think of departments in town that could use the money in addition to the schools, but this is just the hand we get dealt. I want to say 5 years ago, when we were preparing numbers to try to justify seeking an operational override, we knew that 2019 was going to be the bad year, so to speak. And we knew that that's when sort of our we could get by pretty well 2016, 2017. 2018 was going to be a little more challenging. 2019 was going to be essentially a year of no growth. And I think, unfortunately, we're up against that reality now. So ultimately what will happen is we'll all get together, we'll all figure it out, and we'll make it work for the spring budget as we have. The last time we had to delay town meeting because we didn't get the work done was 2013. We couldn't agree on a budget. We had different budgets from the Finance Committee, a different budget from the town administrator, and rather than go to town meeting with that dispute hanging over us, we essentially tabled town meeting so we could get together, hash it out, and do all that work. And since then, the process has gone quite well. And I think the superintendent deserves a lot of kudos from that. She's under tremendous pressure from parents, from teachers, from staff, from the public at large, and from the school committee to get as much as she can for her department. And I have to say, I appreciate the willingness she's shown over the years to work with us in arriving at something that you folks can all survive, and we can survive on the town side as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Pigeon, come on down.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was thinking the other day, in my 15 years involved with finance committees in 3 different communities, we've never found one function that is less important than any other function. And that's the extraordinary difficulty in trying to figure out budgets that balance, that accomplish things that we hold important. It is a necessity as the Finance Committee that we take an adversarial approach to any proposal made by both of our principals in running our community. And I assure you we do so with a great deal of thought and concern for what we are saying no to or hopefully saying yes to in the compromises. We're fortunate we have some very astute people that manage our town, and I say on my committee, we have some extraordinary backgrounds that give us an in-depth view of what we try to do. Thank you very much to all of you for what you do. Now, when we go into our hearings, the Finance Committee comes up next after Derek and Judy and everybody concerned makes their proposal, and we'll give it our due diligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pigeon. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry, I might have already been answered. I don't remember if I heard correctly. Right now, this year, how many buses do not have cameras, other than special ed?
Do not. I don't have the exact number, but the majority do not have.
The majority do not. All right, thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Jeff Sweat, member of the school committee. I'm on the school committee, but I also represent an organization, meaning I'm on the board of directors of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. People should understand that we find ourselves in this position, which is to say insufficient resources to run a town, including a school district, because the foundation budget is insufficient to redistribute the wealth of this community so that it doesn't matter what zip code you live in, the quality of your education will be high no matter what. For the first time to my knowledge, the history of the Association of School Committees, we actually will be advocating and potentially funding the reopening of the Massachusetts Supreme Court case to say to the state of Massachusetts, specifically the governor and the legislature, you have a foundation budget review commission that has said the resources are insufficient. You have a Supreme Court that has left this case open so that if anybody brings it back, they can mandate that the spending occur. The specific reasons are well known as to why there are insufficient resources. And when I give these reasons, I don't mean to make anybody or any parent, child, or school district a villain, but the truth is that the cost of special education, and you can see in this presentation, and the cost of health care in this state, and therefore to provide those health care benefits to the employees of the school district, and for that matter, the town as well, have risen much faster than the formula in the foundation budget. That's a simple fact. And approximately 80% of the school districts in Massachusetts are doing essentially what we're doing, which is cutting, 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 because those two factors have not been accurately reflected in the foundation budget. So I don't want anybody in this room, or for that matter, anybody listening and watching, to wonder how we got into this mess. It's well known how we got into this mess. How we get out of it may require legal action, and it may require the reopening of the Supreme Court case involving this formula, but we didn't get into this mess because anybody in this town, or for that matter, in other school districts and in other towns, acted inappropriately. We got in this mess because the very basis for the constitutionally mandated level of support for the education of children has not been provided by the legislature and the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Sweat, for talking about that. Very important to remember that we have so many unfunded mandates that we're dealing with. At this time, I would also like to make sure that I thank Mr. Sweat and Mrs. Bakayoko for all the work they put into the budget, being on the budget committee, and again, Dr. Shaverhood and Mr. McMillan. Great presentation. Concise, to the point, very understandable. Appreciate it all. And I just want to make sure before I take a motion to adjourn that there's no one else who would like to ask a question. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. The FinCom has also adjourned. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.